Lisa MacLeod, and I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for Nepean, soon to be retired.
You have talked about in the past a little bit in terms of some of the online abuse you've experienced. Can you walk us through when that first started, and do you have any sense as to why they were coming after you?
Well, look, it started sort of in 2006 when I got elected. And we were just learning about social media. 2007 was when people started getting on Facebook. I think 2010 was when I went on X, which was formerly Twitter. And they both started out as great areas where you could connect with people in your community, connect with people that you were in high school or university with. Then it became more about sharing events and political positions. And then sometime in the 2014, 2015 era is where it started to be run by, I would say, bots, but sometimes in cases, real people that were led by special interest groups, whether that was a union or an association, with targeted attacks. And so I would say that was when it really started. And I've taken on many controversial positions, some that I've never backed down from. And as a result of that, it raises the ire for myself and any other type of politician who's like me, who is in this for a passionate purpose, has a calling, and knows where they want to go. And I'm not saying a type of politician as a woman or as a conservative. I'm saying that there's lots of politicians across the spectrum who are in this for good and want to pursue ideas and push their agenda through. And we often get the wrath. And it's become quite dangerous for me. I had multiple death threats. I had a woman incarcerated not once but 3 times as a result of this. And in the 2022 election, I just couldn't take anything anymore. I was being targeted and harassed, not just online but in person. And I decided to self-harm to stop it because my world became incredibly small. I was suffocating and I wanted to die. And a lot of this was because of online trolls without any sort of name or identifier around them, but who felt that they were able to get to me very closely and to personalize things, including with my family, and really wanted to eliminate me. And I don't think it was just off of the ballot. And I think that level of hate, particularly when it exists anonymously, is very dangerous for our democracy.
My God, you said you wanted to die over this.
I ended up in the hospital. On all kinds of machines with some real severe repercussions that could have caused either a stroke or seizure. I had about 2 weeks left of the election campaign. I was a cabinet minister, very high profile, and there was a certain association that didn't let up on me for a good 4 years. They're still attacking me, and they get away unfettered. And I think that until my colleagues of all political stripes at all levels of government start to condemn this behavior and set parameters around what's acceptable and what's not in political discourse, and no laws can do that. That is actually the leadership of your elected politicians, then it's going to continue to happen, and it's going to continue to happen to other people. One of the things that we're seeing right now online is the ability for these organizations to try to dehumanize politicians. And by dehumanizing us, it obviously makes it easier for people to attack us. But on the other side of that screen is me or Charlie Angus or or it's Marco Mendocino. But it's somebody behind that screen and our families. And that starts to attack our own self-worth. And, particularly add on for me, a mental illness, which is bipolar disorder, it can be quite catastrophic. And I don't know who would want to run in politics today knowing what I know and seeing what I have seen. It is probably one of the bigger threats to democracy, and I believe it's right up there with war, foreign influence and interference, and terrorism is what's happening to our elected officials. And if we're not careful, someone is going to be hurt either at the hands of one of these perpetrators or threats, or it's going to be at their own hands. I think that suicide is going to be a very big issue for us as we move forward. And we cannot underestimate the impact of this online hate.
When it started escalating for you, what did you do about it?
Well, obviously we would call the police, and it started for me, my first death threat like it's a badge of honor, right? Oh, I got my first death threat in 2015. And, it was a teacher, a high school teacher, and who had been drinking after a protest. So it wasn't as serious as I thought, but it is not easy for my staff to pick up the call and hear someone is coming to threaten me and kill me. So the police obviously get involved. We started to build protocols in place in order to deal with it. We took everything seriously. But when it really got bad was probably 2018, 2019. I became a member of the government after being in service for many, many years, 13 before that, in opposition. And, at first it was kind of funny, right? Like some of the memes that people would come up with, and you get a joke, and then you get somebody that went a little bit too close below the belt, and then they would go after your child. And then they would go after everything from my mental illness to my weight, to I know where you're at, I know the details of your mortgage, and then it just starts to get very scary. And then it just seems like you're being, I'll use it this way, when you're like in grade 6, and you're in the schoolyard and a bunch of bullies that are in grade 9 come around and they swarm you and they encircle you and they encase you and you're afraid to move and you don't know what you're going to do because you're alone. That's every day for some politicians, including me, feeling like there's no allies, there's no light, there's no support. And when you start to internalize that, you not only are dehumanized in the bully's face, but you start to dehumanize yourself too, and you have no self-esteem left. And for those of us with an underlying mental illness, it can be deadly. And I can't say that enough, that this is not about me. This is about an experience that I've had, which is similar to experience that almost every other politician in our country is experiencing.
What do you say to, as you're an elected official, and we hold our elected officials to a higher degree, and we expect a certain amount of behavior and leadership. So what do you say to other elected officials, whether they be municipal, provincial, federal, that not encourage this, but do the personal attacks that might incite the crazies, if you will, to come out of the woodwork?
Well, I think too, look, you're looking at extremists who sometimes maybe can be incited, but they cannot be controlled. And they perhaps are dealing with their own mental illness and they become fixated. And that's what happened with me, I think, is I've had some people that were fixated. I have been extremely disappointed with some of my colleagues who said I deserved the death threats or I deserve to die, or, tried to talk to me about my own self-worth. I would never do that to them, particularly now that I know how hard it is. I would expect that politicians today would understand it is okay to hold someone accountable for a position. It's okay to have some fun with sarcasm. But where it gets beyond the pale is when the personal attacks threaten someone's safety. And I think we all have a role to play. And you know what? Think about former presidential candidate John McCain, when people were attacking Barack Obama for his birth certificate. And at his own detriment or possible detriment, John McCain stood up and said, he's not your enemy. He's my opponent. Like, he's who I'm running against. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But he sent a message to his supporters, and he sent a message to all Americans in his country that if you're going to debate Barack Obama and you support John McCain, then do so on the high level. Now, of course, someone would come back to me and say, well, he lost. But he did so with dignity. At the end of the day, we are temporary in these buildings, whether it's Parliament Hill or Queen's Park or City Hall. And we pass through, and many others will pass through after us, and many pass through before us. So there has to be a way where we actually defend one another and not tolerate the types of threats we're seeing and the types of harassment. Again, this isn't to say that if my next door neighbor was upset with me, because I didn't talk to my city councilor about our garbage pickup, yeah, that's a legitimate complaint. But if there's somebody anonymous who is right now suggesting that they're part of the NDP or the Liberal Party and they're trying to incite something against me, then I think that one of my colleagues from that party needs to stand up. And I've done that for Liberals, I've done it for Conservatives. I just think it has no place. Might be my maritime upbringing, where you're probably related to or have known somebody your entire life that you're running against, and I've always tried to apply that. But that level of decorum just doesn't exist anymore. And so those of us who are fortunate enough to be the first past the post, have an obligation to set the tone.
And what happens, in your opinion, if politicians don't come together and take that approach that you're saying they should?
Well, I'm going to name two names. United States, Gabby Giffords, and the United Kingdom, Joe Cox. I believe somebody will die. And I think that until we get control over, and it's not just online, it's these protests that are occurring right now that have become violent in the streets of Toronto and Ottawa and Montreal. It is the fear that some of us have when we go to the grocery store. It's the fear some of us have that someone's going to walk into our constituency office, we're not going to be there, and it's going to be our staff member. Most of this stuff doesn't happen on the precincts, it happens in our own communities. And I'm quite afraid that that's something that happened to Joe Cox, who was murdered during what they would call a surgery in the UK, or constituency day, or Gabby Giffords when she was just at an event outside of her grocery store and was shot. Like, these are the types of things we have to be afraid of. And I'm not being melodramatic, and I'm not being overly I'm not even being inflammatory. This is a concern I have each and every single day, that I have MPP behind my name. Presently, I'm the longest serving member of Provincial Parliament in Ottawa, the longest serving woman at Queen's Park at the moment. I probably have a few more in me. But even as much as I want to contribute, it's just taken too much from me. And it's taken too much from my family. And I've felt peace. I don't want to give that up.